Hi guys, Ross here and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be talking about subsurface scattering in Cinema 4D and Redshift. Now this is actually something that I talked about quite a few years ago in an old YouTube tutorial, but since then Redshift has updated its subsurface scattering model and this is the latest and greatest way to approach it. Now just like the last few posts, this is taken from an old Patreon video where we talked about modeling and UV unwrapping and texturing this whole soap bar, as well as how to do these really nice kind of soap bubbles slash foam material. So a lot was packed into that video, but today I just want to focus on the subsurface scattering and also a little bit about lighting. So there's going to be a lot packed into today's video and it's going to be full of great tips and tricks for you guys. Without further ado, I'm going to stop waffling and let you guys jump straight in. So enjoy the video and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Start to dial in subsurface scattering. I just want to say before we dive into this that lighting plays quite a key part in subsurface scattering. So with this HDR, we'll give it a test, but it may not give us the most interesting results because you tend to need quite a strong key light in order to really pick up on the subsurface scattering. So let's dive into it anyway, and if we need to adjust the lighting, then we can do that. When I'm setting up the subsurface, I like to disable all the other parameters. So we'll disable diffuse and we'll disable reflection. And we'll go down to the subsurface tab and we're just going to enable the weight on this to 1. So now you can see it's completely washed out and you can see it's got a very scattered look to it, which is doing exactly how it should, but it's a bit too strong. So let's try reduce the scale to 0.5 and you're going to see it's still quite washed out. Maybe let's try something like 0.1 and it's still washed out, but we're starting to get more of that definition come back in. And I think I was right in saying that the HDR is going to be a bit strong. So let's maybe just try an area light. Now this is kind of my default scene I set up in Cinema where I've got some lights already set up. But what I'm doing is taking an area light and I'm just going to move this in behind the object, maybe have it slightly above, maybe slightly to the side, and we'll see how this looks. Maybe we'll bring it around like this. And actually what I might do is I'm going to rotate the camera to have it kind of like how we had it in the example scene to the left side like this. Let's lock that in place and we'll just reposition this. Maybe we'll have this light kind of around the front just because I want to create a similar lighting setup. Bring it around and let's turn the spread of this light down so it's much harsher. Something like this, and maybe just to kind of check it, I will disable subsurface for now and just enable base, and that way we can get like a proper look at how this lighting is working. So yeah, I want to bring this around to the front, kind of like that. And then what I might do is re-enable that HDR, but I'm going to have it super low, and I'm also going to match it up to be the same kind of orientation as the key light we have. So it should cast similar shadows. So if we compare both of these, we can try match this dome light up. Yeah, and then what we'll do is we'll just turn the intensity of this way down to like -2. And all that's going to do is just fill in some of those shadows, especially on the left-hand side. Whilst we're here, we may as well drop a floor down. Why not? And yes, we're going to have to lift up the soap. So a good technique for this is if you go back to your object mode, we can see that it's 10 centimeters in height. And because the axis is in the middle, we can just put the Y position at 5 and that should rest it perfectly on the floor. Let's have a look. That looks about right. That looks good to me. And I think now we're kind of seeing the shadows. I think we can kind of reorient our lighting. So maybe let's move the rim light more around to the side. So let's do that. Maybe like this. And I'm going to turn the spread way down. And the reason for that is it's going to give us much harsher lighting, which will give us more interesting subsurface scattering. So let's just move this around like so. I'm just going to refer to the original version I did where it was like over the top like this, but it was actually quite front on. Like so. Like that. I think that looks about right. And we're going to turn the spread all the way down. Give us a really harsh light, and we'll bring it in closer as well, just so that it's a bit more intense, like that. And I think that looks pretty good. And then what we'll do is we'll re-enable this HDR, which is just this bathroom HDR from Maxim Roz, my classic go-to. And we'll just reposition this to be in a similar kind of light setup to the area light. I like to match them up so that they're kind of staying true to one another. And you can kind of see, if I enable the HDR, you get the double shadows, and you can use this to kind of line up that HDR, make sure they're roughly in the same spot. So that looks pretty good. Maybe we can turn down the shadow, the exposure on that HDR. So this is looking pretty good, and maybe we can bump up the exposure of our light. Okay, cool. This is looking good. I'm happy with this. Let's now start to look at the subsurface scattering. So we're going to disable that base again and enable the subsurface. And now you can see how it's scattering throughout our object. And let's have a play with the scale. You can see if I bump the scale up to 1, it's going to completely wash it out. And if you look at references of soaps, there's obviously all different types. Some are a lot more, I guess they have a lot more subsurface to them, and some are a lot more rigid and don't. So I guess it depends on the look of the soap you're trying to create. I'm actually going to go for something like 0.2, and then I'm going to use the color parameter, and this is where I'm actually going to dial in the color of our soap. So I want to go for, yeah, something like yellow, something orange, maybe in between the two of them. I think something like this works quite well. And you can see now how that subsurface is working. If I was to put this down to like 0.01, so that's basically no subsurface, now it turns into more of like a diffuse material, and we'll take a screenshot quick. And now if I was to put that up to like 0.25, which is actually the value I used for the previous render, I can take a screenshot, and you can see the difference that makes. So the light is actually being absorbed by the object and then scattered throughout the volume. And that is one of the beauties of this new random walk subsurface scattering, is that it's more physically accurate. So it's going to give you nicer color bleed. It's going to calculate quicker. It's just going to look a lot better, a lot more realistic in general. I think this looks pretty good. I think actually I may tone it down slightly. Let's go for maybe something like 0.2. And then what we can actually do is dial in another color into the radius. So the scale is going to be affected by the color of the radius. So if I was to change this radius to black, you can see now it just completely eliminates all the subsurface scattering we have, even though the object is still tinted orange. So we now basically have like a diffuse material, but it's all being driven through the subsurface. So if I was to change this to white, now we have that subsurface, and you could use this to create some really interesting results. So for example, I could take a max on noise, and I could scale this way down to like 0.1, and maybe I'll clamp this so there's a bit more contrast. Something like this. And I could plug this into the subsurface amount. I think that's the right value. Let me check. Nope, it's the radius. Plug it into the subsurface radius, which should be the right one. There we go. And now I outputted this. So now you'd have areas of where it's like super scattered and areas where it's basically like a diffuse material. So you could create some really cool imperfections in your subsurface scattering if you use this in a clever way. For now, I'm just going to disable that. And what I'm going to do is actually put a color into this radius. So this will basically be kind of another color which will be absorbed and scattered throughout your object. So I could change this to a red. And now you're going to see it's going to slightly tint the color that's being scattered throughout the object. So I'll take another screenshot, and now you can kind of see the before and after. So now we're getting slightly warmer tones in that scattering, and you can use this to obviously, yeah, just add like an additional level of detail and color into your object. So I think that actually works quite well with that red color. I may just tone it back to be slightly more orange just so it blends into the actual color of the soap a bit more. And maybe let's put it at like 20%. And yeah, that's just going to make it a bit more orange. And as you can tell, I've only put 20% saturation. You don't really have to go over the top with this. I could even put it down to 10, do another screenshot, and you're going to see it just helps to add in, yeah, another layer of color in there. I may actually go for 20 because I quite like that saturated look. Maybe we'll go 15, meet in the middle. That is good. So we've already got that really nice kind of scattered look to it, and it's given us that soapy feel already. I think now we could probably get away with dialing up that displacement. I'm just cautious that it is kind of super jagged. This may be a displacement subdivision thing. So maybe we need to increase the maximum subdivisions to 6. And yeah, that's going to give us a much cleaner result. So now we can get away with more displacement, which is good. And that is looking good to me. So now let's start to dial in all the additional detail you're seeing here with like the little bubbles kind of these like vertical lines going through it, and just general kind of displacement and detail in the soap. So I hope you enjoyed watching that video. As I said, this was a snippet from a larger Patreon video where we talked about the whole setup of this soap bar, as well as how to do this really complex foam material as well. So super exciting stuff. So if you want to check out the rest of that video and kind of more of those nitty-gritty bits and pieces from this project, then you can check that out over on the Patreon. I hope you enjoyed the video today. Enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.